This footage was captured in 1916. It's the second film ever to look underwater. At that time, the vast majority of people had never seen what the world looked like beneath the waves. And in order to get the footage, they invented this. A unique dive tube system with a chamber on the end called a photosphere. Centuries of innovation had led to this technology being possible. But the photosphere wasn't the only invention for this movie. There was also this, the Octopus suit. The film was at the forefront of technological innovation. Bringing a new horror to cinema. A few years before the film, John Ernest Williams had the idea of adapting one of his father's inventions with the help of his brother. His father designed a tube system for repair and excavation under the sea. It could reach depths of 250 feet, 76 meters, but it wasn't commercially successful. John had the idea to create a large dome-like chamber that would allow him to take photos underwater without the need for diving equipment. In 1912, they managed to take their first photos underwater, astonishing the world with the quality of what they could capture. But more importantly, they realised they would have enough light for a motion picture camera. The Williams brothers weren't the first people to take photos underwater, but they were the first to record a film. The technology that made this possible had been hundreds of years in the making. Seeing the world underwater was a dream that went back to ancient Romans and Greeks, with the basic snorkels made from reeds, and most famously, Alexander the Great supposedly using a dive bell. But the first true diving design that we're aware of is this. This medieval dive suit from 1459 was designed by Hans Talhofer in his illustrated book of war weapons. Its design was based around the appropriately named frogmouth helmet, used for jousting in that era. Talhofer was followed by Da Vinci in 1508, with his drawings of dive equipment, equally designed for war. It wasn't until a few hundred years after the Talhofer suit that the first known use of diving equipment came about, and it came in the form of a barrel. Designed by John Leatherbridge, his dive machine, as he called it, was designed like a barrel with two armholes, supposedly surrounded by oiled leather for a near watertight seal, and a viewing port. John successfully managed to dive using the machine over the course of 9 years, collecting silver from sunken shipwrecks. The design was very limited and worked by lowering the diver on a crane, then lifting them back up once they got low on air. It managed to reach depths of 22 meters. By the 1800s, the standard diving dress changed how we interact with the ocean, although there were some problems with the design.
For any reason, the pressure within the suit built to 2 pounds more than that exerted by the surrounding water, the force exerted by the secondary valve spring is counteracted, and the air released. Pressure above 2 pounds would cause the diver's suit to blow up like a balloon. It would be impossible for him with his stiff arms to reach his hand wheel, and he might be blown to the surface, doing himself serious injury if he came from great depth by the sudden change of pressure. Bends would be the best he could hope for.
This new accessibility to the submarine world coincided with the invention of photography, and just 20 years after the first camera was invented, came the first underwater images. Although pioneering, the images were hard to interpret at best, and it wasn't until Louis Boutin that underwater photography would truly be possible. The biggest issue he had to overcome, apart from protecting the camera underwater and at pressure, was the long exposure needed to take photos. In the 1800s, taking a portrait meant sitting still for as long as possible in order to expose enough light to the camera plate. For context, the first photo ever taken of a person was by mistake. The photo was taken on top of a roof, but with all the movement in the city, it meant that nothing was still enough except for the buildings and this one man, who stood still while his shoes were shined. For Louis Boutin to take photos underwater in the 1890s, he would need around 30 seconds to get a correctly exposed photograph, which meant that anything he captured would be too blurry and underexposed. Using the newest lenses of the time and multiple iterations of his camera design, he managed to capture images like these. But in order to take these images deeper and in less well-lit environments, it would lead him to design a unique system to deal with the lack of light. He and his colleagues came up with multiple versions of a camera flash underwater, and after much trial and error, came up with this, a magnesium flash lamp. The lamp contained a flame, kept alight by a barrel filled with oxygen, which was weighed down A rubber tube was then used to blow magnesium into the flame and create a small but bright explosion. With this, he was able to capture the first true, deep underwater images of a diver. The pictures were so clear that the card being held by the diver could be read, even though it was held upside down. Following the success of his images, he and his team improved on their flash technology, using huge battery arc lamps. This is why the Williams brothers' photosphere was game-changing, as it didn't require the same struggles that had plagued Louis Vuitton, being that their camera was safe and dry. Their viewport was attached to a collapsible watertight tube system, patented by their father 10 years earlier. It could be suspended from a specialised barge. Shortly after revealing the first images taken from inside the photosphere, they were approached by investors to make a film. The film they ended up making was called 30 Leagues Under the Sea, named after the classic Jules Verne novel, Jules Verne also being the name of the barge they designed for the film. The film would be the first ever underwater movie shown to an audience. It was a documentary-style film featuring scenes where a man, only described as the Native, was supposed to wrestle and kill a shark, which they baited with a dead horse. But being unable to capture the moment on film, John Williams dived in to do it himself. The film's success worked out well for the Williams brothers, and allowed them to get funds for a much bigger project, an adaptation of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, featuring a creature that at the time was quoted being the terrifying octopus that chilled the blood of millions of movie fans. Its creator claimed that if one snake shown on screen could bring chills to an audience, 8 serpents combined in the fiendish head of an octopus can multiply the thrills 1,000-fold. The octopus suit was designed by John Williams himself, a design which he was so proud of that he had it patented. Originally, he wanted to find a giant octopus of 30 feet long, but being unable to do so, he created a lifelike version of his own. Like most great inventors, he started with the tentacles. Quote, "First I must produce one tentacle. It must writhe and squirm and reach out, take hold of objects, draw them in, coil round them like a python to resemble every detail of the deadly arm of an octopus." The octopus was controlled by a diver, who would be the brains of the creature, using compressed air sent down to a tentacle to animate them, following John's commands for the scene. John detailed his problems making the octopus in the book 20 Years Under the Sea, where he wrote, "The matters of water pressure and buoyancy were most difficult to deal with. When inflated, each arm of the octopus required about 100 pounds of weight to neutralise it, so that the octopus would sink and become, to all intents and purposes, part of the undersea world. How to distribute nearly half a ton of weight throughout its body and yet have it flexible and seem light as a feather in the water was one of the most ticklish problems. The weight must be substantial, yet fluid in effect. The fragile construction of the creature added to the difficulties. Getting it in and out of the sea was another problem. The octopus was designed specifically for a dramatic fight scene when Captain Nemo would rescue and capture a pearl diver. In order to make this as real as possible, John Williams wanted the octopus to eject ink when Nemo attacked. John went through different inks and how they looked in the water, but wasn't happy with any of them. He eventually landed on a mud-like substitute that would look the best on camera. He again wrote, "One day I was discussing the need of a slimy sort of substance that would adhere to the body of the octopus, when one of my West Indian divers produced a quantity of sticky marl from a swamp. Dropping some of this marl into the sea, I noticed that it quickly dissolved and produced a perfect sepia ink." As he recorded the scene, the actor playing the swimmer ended up getting really caught by the octopus and nearly drowned, which John was extremely excited by and felt it added more realism to the great battle. When 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea came out in 1916, audiences were blown away by the octopus creature. Looking at it now, it can be a little hard to understand why. The film struggled a bit at the box office, but not from its quality. It struggled due to competition with new technology. The release of the first non-silent movie, The Talkie, being one of the first movies to show what the world looked like underwater, using groundbreaking technology, wasn't enough. If you found this video interesting, then let me know your thoughts in the comments below. It'd be great to hear what people think.